It's speculated. The reason for disclosure, and it no longer needs to be legal, is because, all the technology is in private companies. What do you think of this, and how do you think this could be resolved?
Well, I think it's wrong on two counts. Who cares what anybody speculates about this? You can throw darts at a dartboard with yes, no, maybe on it, I think most of the big research projects were done by private companies under government contract, not on their own. That aircraft nuclear propulsion program was sponsored by the Atomic Energy Commission and the United States Air Force. It was done by General Electric, Pratt Whitney, also Convair Fort Worth. But Uncle Sam owned the store, so to speak. So I don't think so. And I would hope, as a matter of fact, that technology developed with government funding should make its way out when it doesn't violate security to do so. For example, suppose we figured out a new way to detect aircraft moving in the atmosphere. Should we really be putting that out on the table? I don't think so. You don't want your enemies to have that data. So it isn't just a question of greed on the part of industry. And I know I've spoken at over 600 colleges, and I know some of the academics look down their nose at industry. I've had two different people tell me that if Roswell really happened, Stan, they'd have had to pull half the physicists out of the colleges in the country to deal with that. And I just laughed. That's absurd. Los Alamos was employing 7,000 people at that time. There are a whole bunch of other major laboratories with very competent people who had security clearances, who were readily available to have material sent to them and so forth. So, it's false reasoning and based on no evidence whatsoever.
You wrote this book a few years back, Captured, about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction that fascinated me when I was a child. What's your take on the abduction phenomenon, and is there an alien agenda?
Yeah, most of the work on the book was done by Kathleen Marden, Betty's niece. My name is first because the publisher said it'll sell more, Stan. What do you say to a publisher when he tells you that? You don't say, well, we don't want it to sell. You can hardly do that. I think that's an outstanding case primarily because of Dr. Benjamin Simon, not just because the Hills were respectable people, and they certainly didn't intend to get any publicity for it. That was somebody violating confidence. But Dr. Simon was a world-class expert on treating what today we would call post-traumatic stress disorder. He ran a hospital with 3,000 beds for war veterans coming back from the Second World War. Your buddy's head gets blown off next to you. It's a little hard to integrate that into your life. And he didn't know anything about flying saucers, but he knew a lot about getting people to relive experiences to find out what happened when there's missing time. The guy with his buddy's head blown off has blocked it out. But if you integrate it properly and so forth, you can find out what happened. And Dr. Simon was the star of an Army movie, Let There Be Light, showing how he worked with war veterans. And they're still coming back from war with PTSD. It was shell-shock war veterans was the expression back then, but, PTSD sounds so much more sophisticated. Anyway, he has said in writing, he's dead now, so we can't say it vocally, that the emotional intensity for Betty and Barney, these were separate sessions now, they each had about 10, was so intense that it matched that of the war veterans that he'd worked with. He had to stop one session each because he felt they wasn't sure they could handle it. The emotional intensity was so great. So yes, Earthlings are being abducted by aliens. And many people find that objectionable because nobody has their permission. And there are many people claiming abductions who haven't been abducted. And you don't just run off and find you a nice parlor hypnotist to say, oh, I'll find out what happened. It's got to be done properly, carefully. Matter of fact, Kathleen is working on a new book about alien abductions. And I've read most of it, not quite all of it yet. So I think aliens are abducting. Now, why they're doing it, they're obviously trying to get information, judging by the tests they seem to run, about Earthlings. But whether it's a class project, I mean, when I was a kid in high school, I cut up a frog. It wasn't because I was intrinsically interested in frogs. And there were millions of kids who cut up frogs to find out a little about anatomy. So it's very hard to judge what's really going on. Is this a thesis project? You know, who knows? Maybe they're looking for Earthlings to graft to steal a certain kind of genetic material from. I don't know. Now, you could be a noisy negativist and say, Stan, they're going to clobber us, and they're just getting all the data before they do that. You know, like the turkeys on November 15th undoubtedly think that they're being well taken care of. Look, they get all the food they can eat, more than they can eat. You get water, they're kept warm when it's cold outside. Obviously, nice guys. And then it's Thanksgiving. Too bad. So what I'm saying is you need to be really careful about jumping to conclusions about these things. And it is important that people be helped, but not in ways that are going to create problems for them. Neither Kathleen nor I believe one should immediately rush to a friendly hypnotist. There's more to the story than that.
Now, do you think the U.S. is still controlling and imposing the global cover-up of other governments?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I think there is cooperation and money talks. There was a case down in Brazil, the Varginha case, and I happened to be down there when news it hit the headlines. And there were stories that apparently the U.S. came along and offered enough money to grab the wreckage and what was left. And I don't know. I think, remember, all governments have a common interest, surprising as it may sound, in not telling us what's going on. The 6 reasons I give for the cover-up apply to all governments. First, you want to figure out how the darn things work. They make wonderful weapons delivery and defense systems, outmaneuver anything we got. So the world budget right now for things military this year is $1 trillion. So that's an important consideration for most governments. The second problem is you don't want the other guy to know that you know that he knows. What if he figures out how they work before you do? You know, it's the old weapon, counter weapon, bigger spears, stronger shields, that sort of thing. So you can't tell anybody because you don't want them to know what you know, and you don't want to tell anybody what you know because you don't want them to know that. The third problem is if you were to make an announcement, what would happen? You know, say the Queen and the Pope, my 2 favorite, highly trusted people around the world, about the same age, all you can say. What if they were to say, indeed, the word is that Earth is being visited by extraterrestrial spacecraft? What would happen? Mental hospital admissions would go up. Stock market would go down. That's never good for many people. And there'd be an immediate push, I think, on the part of the younger generation for a new view of ourselves, instead of as Americans, Canadians, Greeks, Peruvians, whatever, as Earthlings. I mean, from an alien viewpoint, we are all Earthlings. We don't seem to like that very much, if you notice. No government wants that. Nobody in power wants to give up power. There's a fourth problem. Pat Robertson has loudly proclaimed that we are the only intelligent life in the universe, which I find a very strange notion. And that all this UFO stuff is the work of the devil. I haven't seen any signs of that either. But he'd be up the creek without a religious paddle if we were told the truth. There's another peculiar one, goes back to something you asked earlier. People say, look, Stan, if they're coming here and we're not going there, they're obviously ahead of us. That means that soon there'll be new methods of energy production. There goes the oil companies. New methods of ground and air transport. There goes those companies. Economic chaos. And I say, yeah, there's always chaos when there's progress, but you know, there aren't many buggy whip manufacturers anymore, and we've survived that. The last reason for the cover-up, I think, is that I have on 7 different occasions been told of situations in which aircraft went up, military aircraft went up to chase UFOs and didn't come back. And nobody's been told about that. And if I've heard of 7 instances, there's going to be a heck of a lot more than that. And these are people not seeking publicity. I told to one guy who was sent up, and he did come back because his guns weren't loaded. He tried to shoot the thing down. People forget that in 1952, there were orders given to military pilots. Shoot them down if they don't land when instructed to do so. That sounds a little silly. How do you tell an alien, get your craft the heck on the ground, so we can look at it? That doesn't sound very reasonable. So those reasons are enough to keep most countries away from doing anything that would change the balance of power. That's what's happening in the world.
While I got you here, do you have any classified information you want to share with our viewers in regards to UFOs right here on Third Phase of Moon?